I love you, Nai.
I love you. I love you.
There's something about grandmas in movies that can make us uncontrollably emotional. Maybe it's because they represent our familial roots, or maybe it's because their age makes us hyper aware of our loved one's mortality. We're reminded to appreciate them while they're still here, and if they're already gone, these films prompt our fond memories of growing up pampered with their affection, and prodded with their well-meaning criticisms. With the recent release of Minari, I wanted to touch on another A24 film with a somewhat similar premise that struck a particularly deep emotional chord with me. The Farewell is a story about grief and loss, but it also speaks to the struggles many Americans grapple with regarding the ever-growing disconnect with our cultural identities. For many immigrants and children of immigrants, the balance between the way of life where our family came from and where we are now can be difficult to navigate. And while there are universal themes everyone can relate to, one of the aspects I respect about the film is how it doesn't try to be accessible or more palatable to American film standards, a certain superficial quality that Hollywood typically imposes on stories about immigrants. It's a story that takes place in China, featuring Chinese people, primarily speaking Mandarin, and yet the movie doesn't feel like a foreign film, because it isn't. Despite what the Golden Globes would have you believe, it's an American film, telling a profoundly relatable American story. In this essay, I want to delve into how the film not only deals with the grief of potentially losing a loved one, but the complicated grief of feeling lost between cultures, and what it means to be Asian American. The Farewell, a 2019 film written and directed by Lulu Wang, tells the true story of a family collectively deciding to keep a vital secret. The matriarch of the family, Nai, has fallen ill with terminal cancer, and they decide it's best for her not to know about it.
There's nothing they can do. So everyone decided it's better not to tell her.
I just wanted to mention that the actress who plays Nai is like the sweetest looking grandma ever, and I wanted to show you this picture for her being really thrilled to meet Leonardo DiCaprio. Anyway, the film follows Nai's beloved granddaughter Billy, an American character played by Awkwafina. While visiting one night, Billy soon pries the news about her grandmother from her reluctant parents.
Just tell me what's going on. Your Nan is dying.
The whole family had planned a fake wedding as an excuse for everyone to travel to Shangshun and spend time with Nai one last time.
I need to go.
Billy.
I need to go.
Everyone thinks better if you don't. Look at you. You can't hide your emotions.
Obviously, Billy goes against her family's wishes and travels to China to see her grandmother, while she struggles with the ethics of her lying to her, regardless of its normalization in their culture. Lying is an integral aspect of the film, as its Chinese titles literally don't tell her. As the opening credits indicate, the story is based on an actual lie first detailed by Wong in an episode of This American Life.
When my grandmother was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer, she was given 3 months to live. She was 80 years old, and my family, for reasons I'll get into in a minute, decided not to tell her. I was totally against this.
In interviews about her personal story in the film, she elaborates on her feelings regarding the family's lie.
I was driven to make the film by the juxtaposition of love and joy with grief and being angry with my family, but on some level understanding it at the same time and just having a lot of questions and not having any answers for them.
Obviously, from an American standpoint, it seems unfathomable and unethical to withhold such dire information from someone. It's also usually illegal.
How do you say illegal?
违法，在美国是违法的，这不是美国。
Western culture, reflecting an individualistic perspective, dictates that Nai is entitled to know the truth about her own health.
说再见，太痛苦了吧？干嘛要让她经历这些呢？
This kind of lie is a common phenomenon in East Asian culture, generally rooted in valuing collectivism and social harmony. Many articles I came across regarding this practice described it as a different form of communication styles between cultures, that it's more of an example of indirect communication rather than outright lying. Collectivism urges the importance of preserving the well-being of the community.
因为你把生命看成是个体的，这正是西方和东方的文化差异问题。东方人是把生命看作是集体的，家庭、社会。
In this instance, it's represented by the family choosing to hide Nai's illness from her. They justify their decision by explaining that they're protecting her, by bearing her emotional burden, sparing her from the pain of knowing she's dying.
你想告诉奶奶事情，是因为怕担责任，因为这个责任太大了。我们之所以不告诉奶奶事情，就是为了分担她的思想压力。
But the film doesn't necessarily portray either side as right or wrong. It's more of a moral dilemma Billy must navigate as she tries to reconcile the differences between her cultural identities.
The people in my life I would talk to, if I talked to my American friends, would have the American answer, and then my family, they would have the Chinese answer. And so I just felt very torn.
I also wanted to mention that while researching collectivism and individualism for this video, I mostly came across Western interpretations of collectivism that generally disagreed with its principles, favoring the more independent ideology.
这些年照顾你姐姐辛苦了啊，以后得为自己多想想啦。
他走了以后啊，我就去深圳找你小姨夫去，也不容易，我也不能在身边照顾他。现在他也快退休了，净替我瞎操心，我这不挺好的吗？
I think this speaks to the disconnect between the cultures and showcases the conflict second-generation Americans often have to deal with. Many children of immigrants must find a balance between two juxtaposing ways of life, because it's not as simple as choosing which moral doctrine better aligns with your personal beliefs. Often it's a turbulent balancing act of assimilating to the values of the country you live in, while still trying to maintain your cultural and familial roots. Billy is the only family member who represents the American point of view in regards to the big lie, as she constantly questions its ethics. But even as she struggles to play along, she spends much of the film hiding her own hardships from them, so as not to worry them. From the very opening of the film, Billy casually lies to Nai Nai.
你们那边冷吗？穿得够吗？戴帽子了吗？
我戴了，不用担心我，奶奶。
And Nai Nai lies to Billy, both as a form of protecting the other.
哎，那是什么声音？你在哪儿？
啊？
我在你小姨奶家呢。
These kind of lies are peppered throughout the film, and ironically, Nai Nai conceals the severity of how unwell she feels in order to keep her family from worrying about her health.
你这么咳嗽能放心吗？有啥不放心的呀？我不就是上回感冒留下的咳嗽病根吗？别跟孩子说啊，他们就瞎担心。行。
These sort of little white lies are all too common for all of us. We tell them because we don't want to burden the people around us with our problems, even as something simple and commonplace as Americans saying, "I'm fine," when someone asks, "How are you?" can be argued as an example of this.
How are you doing with money?
I'm fine.
Can you afford this trip?
Yes, I'm fine.
You need help?
No, I'm fine.
But the film's big lie is interesting because it illustrates a scenario where everyone is telling one person a lie to spare her from her own burden and take it on themselves. This is something they clearly have a hard time with, and witnessing this internal struggle in her family is likely a major reason why Billy begins to empathize with their point of view. This is most evident in Billy's uncle, who spends much of the film trying to convince her that the family's decision is the right thing to do.
再难过，你也不要告诉他。
But even he struggles with hiding his grief and holding on to the lie. While he tells Billy that she must let go of selfishly revealing the lie to Nai Nai, it becomes clear he's also reminding himself of this too.
我们也不想告诉他。
我知道。
无论如何，你也不要告诉他。
If you've been watching from an American point of view, you've probably been contemplating this moral question just as much as Billy had. It's weird to think of this kind of lie as coming from a place of love, but as the film progresses, it prompts us to question our preconceived notions.
你真的好了吗？
真的呀，奶奶给你撒谎干什么？
As you watch Billy's family grieve quietly and try to make Nai Nai as happy as possible, their actions begin to look more like a sacrifice than a betrayal. This is emphasized by the fact Nai Nai lied in the same way for her husband as he was dying.
他气什么气呀？他也做了同样的事情。爷爷得癌症的时候，奶奶也是这么瞒着他来着。
With this knowledge, it seems clear as though the family is doing what Nai Nai would want them to do. The question shifts from, is this right or wrong, to, are good intentions more valuable than the truth? And this is the point at which our outlook shifts, as we're considering the issue from the cultural perspective rather than our own. There's no ill will in their intentions. They sacrifice their own peace of mind to allow Nai to live without the looming fear of her mortality.
Chinese people have saying, when people get cancer, they die.
It's not the cancer that kills them, it's the fear.
Regardless of culture, we tell little and sometimes big lies so our own issues don't have to become everyone's. And while from the outside looking in, the family's lie may seem immoral, for me it was moving to see them care so much about the matriarch of their family and coming together to share an immense burden so she can live the rest of her days in peace.
Isn't it wrong to lie?
I mean, if it's for good, it's not really a lie.
I mean, it's still a lie.
It's a good lie.
Although Billy felt conflicted, she gradually reached a point of mutual understanding. In a scene where Nai almost finds out the truth, Billy goes out of her way to stop it from happening. So while at first she'd felt isolated in her grief, in a strange way, the lie helped her connect with her Chinese family. Billy represents the most Americanized character within 3 generations of a family grappling with the push and pull of immigrating to another country. There are those who stay in their home country and often feel left behind, those who move to a new country and learn to adapt, and those who are raised in it and try to find a balance between the two sides.
在美国要多长时间才能挣上100万美金啊？
很长时间。
真的假的？在中国都是分分钟的事儿啊。
There's a noteworthy dinner scene that particularly stuck with me after watching the film. There are several cultural divides at play in this conversation, but first I'll discuss Billy's mom. After Nai's niece smugly appears to suggest that China is better than America in regards to reaching success, Billy's mom begins a heated discussion with her.
那如果在国内这么好赚钱，干嘛还琢磨把宝送到美国读书啊？
I think since the film centers on Billy and her cultural identity, it can be easy to forget that hers isn't the only Asian American story being explored. Billy's mother appeared to take offense to the implication that she and her husband had made the wrong decision for their family, even having it pointed out to them that they'd left Nai on her own, along with Billy's uncle whose family immigrated to Japan.
就算国外的月亮比中国圆，咱也得多为妈想想，是吧？父母在，不远行嘛。
Her mom felt the need to defend her choice by calling attention to the other mom's hypocrisy, as she'd soon be making the same sacrifice for her own son.
但就是他真的留在那儿，你还要把他送出去，对吗？
She also describes an instance many years ago when they just moved to America. A pastor in a church, upon discovering that Billy's parents couldn't afford to continue her piano lessons after leaving China, gives her parents the keys to the church.
你们孩子什么时候想弹琴的时候就可以进来，教堂所有的钢琴都可以弹。
他们真把钥匙给你了？
这就是美国。
This brings me to another point of the conversation, one which particularly affects Billy and perhaps even her cousin who was raised in Japan.
好，中文不错，就是不敢说。好，听奶奶说两句。
Her mom's story about the pastor is a classic representation of the American dream, as Billy's parents revere the generosity of their neighbors. But the story concludes with Billy's admission that she hasn't followed through with her opportunity.
Billy, 那个钢琴现在还弹吗？
不弹了。
As I've mentioned before, there are a lot of little lies scattered throughout the film. One of the lies that caught my eye was Billy hiding her rejection letter for a Guggenheim Fellowship.
So what's going on with the fellowship?
Nothing.
Well, you still haven't heard anything?
No.
Well, when are they gonna let you know?
I don't know, Dad.
It illustrates the feeling children of immigrants commonly have about validating their parents' sacrifices and maximizing their opportunities in America.
那时候鸡蛋呢挺稀缺的，爸爸妈妈不舍得吃，省下来给你。
Every parent fears what their child, if they're going to succeed or not. But I think having this additional pressure of where you feel like your family sacrificed everything for you, and you somehow have to validate those sacrifices.
At times, it could be difficult to stray away from more assured roads to success because of this desire to actualize the dreams of our parents. But unlike what's portrayed in stories about excessively demanding parents, many of us want to substantiate our parents' sacrifices and reward them for providing such opportunities.
等 Billy 成了有名的作家，那就挣大钱了。现在就等于在为他的天赋投资嘛。
是，养孩子就跟玩股票似的哈。
This is why Billy's shame isn't rooted in how she's dishonored her family with her failures, but rather how she feels she's letting them down, as there's a sense of guilt that comes from falling short of these high expectations. For Billy, her failures aren't just her own, they're also her family's, just as her parents' aspirations aren't just theirs to uphold, but hers as well.
What's that mean?
You said you're a stock investment and you're gonna make us a lot of money.
But I can't expect that from you, right? You are the losing stock.
Often described as a melting pot, American society is based on the idea of cultural integration, as we ideally welcome immigrants and encourage them to assimilate. But it can be difficult to blend into this new culture while they try to maintain a hold of their old one. This difficulty is most apparent in their children, as they grow up in an American culture while living in households with distinctly different values.
生活不只是钱，钱买不了很多东西。
But unlike many films about immigrants, Billy isn't a foreigner struggling to fit in with a Western society. Here, it's the opposite. While she still visibly bears Chinese characteristics, she's very much seen as an American in the eyes of her relatives. It even reflects subconsciously in Billy's own demeanor. When she interacts with people in America, she's confident and at ease.
Oh, what happened, girl? You got fired? I quit. So I was about to get fired.
While in China, she comes off as timid and unsure of herself.
我说的中文不太好，对不起。
说得好，继续说。
Additionally, it's isolating to be immersed in a culture that doesn't fully perceive you to be one of its members. The feeling of otherness is always there.
美国，你看着也不像是美国人呢。
While immigrants must often make an immense effort to fit in with their new home, their children don't experience the same kind of difficulty because they were raised there.
那怎么会不一样呢？肯定是在美国会更好些吧？
就是不一样。
我觉得你肯定更习惯在美国的生活。
But the issue that arises for these children is a sense of inclusion that's just out of their grasp. This is why the surge of more Asian representation in American film and television the last few years has been quite meaningful for Asian Americans like myself. And honestly, it's validating to see our stories being told because it affirms something very obvious, that Asian Americans, and more broadly minorities, belong here and make up a large part of American culture. These are deeply American stories. Regardless of the differences between them, they're all brushstrokes of a larger portrait many of us are familiar with. But somehow, that sense of feeling like an outsider never really goes away. We're pulled between these identities as if they're dichotomous rather than blended, and the deep-rooted fear that comes with this perpetual balancing act is the notion that you won't be able to maintain it, that you'll ultimately lose a part of your culture, and in turn, lose a part of yourself.
哈哈！哎呀，你严肃点行不行啊？啊！
While the rest of Billy's family view her Western assimilation with dismissive judgment, Nai is the only person who seems to appreciate Billy's diverging point of view.
看看我这大孙女儿，我这大孙子，臂力呀，那是相当的强，独立，可不是那种随波逐流的人。
One of the scenes that best captures this is when she jokingly brings up Billy's love life. You know, that classic grandma thing.
孩子，奶奶问你，你有朋友了吗？
Billy wonders why she needs to have a significant other at all, while Nai attests to the importance of finding a partner who will take care of her. But Billy points out that Nai seems to take care of her new husband more than he takes care of her.
能独立也好，女人嘛，要自给自足。
Nai accepts Billy's cultural differences, and even agrees with some of them. For Billy, Nai represents the bridge to the Chinese heritage she left behind. Even as Billy felt physically and culturally distant from her home country, she still felt connected to China through her relationship with her grandma. This makes the knowledge of her cancer diagnosis even more tragic, as on the surface, Billy is obviously grieving the eventual loss of her grandmother. But as she agonizingly hangs on to the family's secret, she's not just afraid of losing Nai, she's afraid of losing what used to be such a significant and meaningful part of her life.
And then we just moved to the States. Everything was different. Everyone was gone.
In Billy's eyes, Nai's mortality raises a grim realization that without her, she has no true link to her heritage. I can personally relate to this experience of not truly feeling connected to one's cultural background. As a second-generation Asian American, I struggle to maintain a relationship with my own heritage, while also noticing the decline in fluency of my native tongue.
连中文都没弄明白，你能干嘛？
Often, it can feel like the culture that helped mold us through our childhood slips away from us as we grow older and further lose our connection to our homelands, our languages, and even our families. In this emotional confrontation, Billy reveals how her grandfather's death affected her.
And then yeah died. You didn't even tell me he was sick. So it felt like he just vanished suddenly.
Billy fondly holds on to her childhood memories in China, specifically the ones with her grandparents, and associates them with her Chinese roots. She clings on to Nai Nai as the last pillar of her connection to China, and feels as though this is her only chance to keep the connection alive. So on Billy's last day in China, she confesses to wanting to stay and live with Nai Nai, revealing her fellowship application was rejected.
我不想让你担心。
我不担心。
It's a powerful moment when Nai Nai gently dismisses Billy's offer and encourages her to live for herself and pursue what makes her truly happy.
一个人的精神支柱非常重要，你会成功的。
It's a remarkable juxtaposition to the collectivist mentality of the rest of her family, but it represents the closeness and love in their relationship. It's intriguing how the film centers on this big lie that Billy's family commits for the sake of social harmony. Yet Nai Nai pushes Billy to value herself and her well-being. Billy takes Nai Nai's advice to heart before their very tearful goodbye, and wonders if this is the last time she'll see her grandma. There's something really special about our bonds with our grandparents. Maybe it's because they usually don't have to deal with us at our worst like our parents do, but our grandparents often see the best in us. They represent the roots of our family tree and feel like the source of immeasurable wisdom and warmth. They're often the thread that keeps our families close-knit and grounded in their heritage. And from their all too honest remarks to their need to feed us, they set the basis for how we remember our families. I'll be honest, I cried a lot in the theater when I first watched this film, and I still can't get through the goodbye scene without crying. I think about the memories from my childhood with my grandparents, listening to their stories and cautionary tales, learning about their adventures and the lessons they learned along the way.
千万不能钻牛角尖儿，因为生活呀，不光是你去做什么。
I think we're all captivated by our grandparents' stories because it widens our worldview and places these real people we care about into the narratives of history, making us better understand our interwoven presence in the world. Our grandparents provide us a comforting sense of guidance through their spirit and experience. So I think what a lot of us were forced to contemplate after watching the film is the sadness of traversing life without that guidance and affection.
This movie taught me to like maybe confront something that I didn't want to confront, which is losing my grandma, you know?
It's a sorrowful moment that makes us consider the impermanence of our loved ones. How would we feel if we knew this could be the last time we saw them? How do we move forward while carrying their memories in our hearts? And how will we carry on their traditions? Nai Nai is the string that holds Billy's family together, and as we established, Billy's perceived connection to China. But as the film concludes, Billy recalls the breathing exercises Nai Nai taught her, the ones meant to release negative energy. Billy stops in the middle of a New York sidewalk, pauses for a moment, and thousands of miles away, she comes to a realization. Your family, your culture, and your heritage are always a part of you. And as Billy releases the grief weighing her down, she's able to let go of the anxiety of losing herself and the understanding that these pieces of her life will always be with her.
你还会回来的，奶奶知道，你总是惦记我。
Hey guys, it's Terrence. I'm curious to know what your experiences are with being an immigrant, or being the second or even third generation in your country. Also, I wanted to take a moment to mention the rising number of anti-Asian hate crimes going on. I put some resources in the description if you'd like to help out in some way. Thanks for watching. Peace.